Thank you. I used to think that the scariest thing in the world of performance was to go on stage after Greg. It's not. It's going on stage thinking you've got a bass to play to find out that you haven't. So why you can't handle the truth? You all know this quote from the film. It's basically about, we've now got a lot of science, we've got a lot of evidence behind what we do, and we've got some amazing researchers and scientists out there. How do we translate that into what we actually tell our patients? Do we need to tell them the full and undiluted truth about what science does know and particularly what science doesn't know? I thought, well, maybe we should. So I've just put a little bit of a report of findings together of how this might look. Because one of the things with the research and the clinicians is that it is difficult. Because I could tell my patients, you know what, I don't really know how this works, but don't worry. Greg and Jan and Dave and Eben says it does. So that's all you need to know. So I put together this little sort of video of how an evidence-based report of findings might look.
So, Mr. Smith, I have taken a careful history of your problem and performed a variety of tests, most of which have questionable validity because of poor sensitivity and specificity. And I have to inform you that my conclusion today is I still really don't know what's wrong with you. I could send you for X-rays or an MRI scan, which would give us a lot of information, most of which would be completely relevant to the problem that you have. You've had your problem for many years, and the statistics show that you will continue to have your problems for many years still. And I'm going to give your problem a name, which we call a diagnosis. I have to do this to satisfy my regulatory body. The truth is, if you saw another 10 chiropractors or osteopaths or physios, we'd all come up with a different diagnosis. And we have no way of knowing who's right. The good news is that I'm likely to help you. I'm going to give a variety of treatments and give you some advice and ask you to do some exercises. We don't really know how these interventions work, but they do tend to. I'll also have to tell you that the alternative to seeing me is seeing one of the other chiropractors or osteopaths or physios who would have come up with a completely different diagnosis and who would more than likely give you a completely different treatment, completely different advice and exercises. But that they will also be likely to help you. We're going to talk about how most of your pain is inside your head and depend on loads of things completely outside mine and maybe your control. Also that your brain is playing tricks on you and make the whole thing seem a lot worse than it actually is. One of the reasons you may feel better with what I do is actually because you like my shirt and found a car parking space right outside the front door today. But research suggests that there's no one better than me to help manage your persistent recurring low back pain, so if you're happy with all of that, let's go ahead and start some treatment.
I have a clinic for sale that is not doing quite as well as it did a few years ago. So we can't do this. So where else do we go? The problem is as chiropractors, when we present stuff to our patients, we suffer from three illusions. We suffer from the diagnosis illusion, the fact that we've actually got a way of specifically finding out what's wrong with our patient. Because again, as I'm sure you'll agree, lots of people will come up with lots of things. But we could all see, everyone in this room could see the same patient and come up with probably a whole list of what's going on there. And we know that a lot of this is just actually imaging findings, they're not diagnoses. So we actually can't specifically diagnose most of the stuff that we treat. Then we also suffer from the specificity illusion, the illusion that we can actually affect a certain joint in a predictable way and have a predictable outcome. And that we can test specific muscles and specific joints and specific nerves, or that we can affect tissue without tools, without tape. We can, but not in the specific way that we would hope to. And then also we're under the illusion that actually that specificity matters massively to our outcome, because there's just no evidence that that's the case. We also then suffer very much from the, patients actually really care about how clever we are. And they really care about the fact that you sit with your spine and you point to a facet joint. And I don't use the spine for my report of findings anymore, because actually patients don't care. And this is the problem, that it's, we've spent such a long time getting cleverer, and that we want to tell everyone how clever we are. That's fine, just don't tell your patient, because they really don't care. Because we have this dichotomy where we sit on one side and we go, well, I've spent all this time, I've spent all this money becoming a chiropractor, and I've need a unique identity. I'm an expert in what I do. I want cultural authority for how clever I am and all this great stuff that I can do for my patients. And of course, on the other side, you've got a patient who just wants to get better. And from my experience, patients actually want three things. They want to know you care, and they want hope that you can actually get them better, and they want a plan. And the plan, again, is the key thing. So whatever stories you tell yourself in your head, just make sure that the one you tell your patient is reasonable, relevant, that it makes sense to the patient, and that it also encompasses these contextual effects that we all now know about. Because words matter, and how you do your report of findings can massively set the patient up either to be a great patient with a great outcome, but it can also set the patient up for dependency. It can also set the patient up for failure. So patients need care, hope, and a plan. This is a quote from Theodore Roosevelt, unless you Google it long enough, and it then also is a quote from Mark Twain. And I'm sure if you Google long enough, you'll probably find that Albert Einstein also said this. So hope. They need to believe you. So you need to have some sort of explanation of why is it you're in pain? Why is it you can't do the things you want to do? And it needs to make sense to your patients. Because without an explanation that they get, you're not going to get by, and they're not actually going to believe you, and then you're on a hiding to nothing. Then we need to set goals, and this is absolutely vital. I've got a couple of key questions that I like to ask my patients. What would you love to be able to do again? Because patients don't come and see you because of the pain. Patients have had pain for 20 years when they come to see you. If pain was going to drive them to your office, they would have been there a long, long time ago. Patients see you because that pain is now massively influencing their quality of life to a point where they don't accept that anymore. And you need to help the patients push the envelope a little bit. Because some patients say, I just want to be able to walk without screaming sciatic pain. That's cool. But what do you really want to do? What did you do 10 years ago that you'd love to get back into doing again? And you just got to help the patient raise that bar up a little bit. Because, of course, that fulfills so well that patient values and patient expectations. Plan. We need a plan. It needs to be structured based on goals. So I promise patients stuff. I promise patients, this is how you're going to feel after this length of time. And after this length of time, this is what I would expect you to be getting back into doing. It's going to be timed and assessed, and I'm going to keep checking where we are. And you're going to keep reporting up how close are we to those goals now. So we have a three-phase plan that I tell my patients about. First of all, it's return to function. We need to get you working properly first. That's what I do. We then need to have you return to play. I do a lot of work in sport, and the return to play is a catchphrase that we use a lot there. But the principles behind return to play of a player that we want to get back on the pitch for Friday is exactly the same principles as getting Mrs. Smith walking her grandkids to school without screaming sciatic pain. And then we need to maintain. And this is the one. I don't treat conditions. None of us do. We don't treat facet joint degeneration. We don't treat supraspinatus tendinopathies. What we treat is function. So whatever your patients present with, you're not treating structure. You're not treating a diagnosis. You're treating function. That's what we do. So regardless of what we pull out of our toolbox, what we're actually doing is trying to affect function. And the great thing about function is we can test it, we can treat it. It's what our patients want. Patients want return to function. It's an outcome measure. Function we can use to test and retest how well our treatment plan is working. And it's relevant and it changes lives. So function is actually what we treat. So your functional battles, whatever technique you use, and I haven't got the slide in here, but there's a massive slide of about 400 different chiropractic techniques. But whatever technique you use, essentially we're trying to do three things. Improve function of our joints, get them working better. Improve tissue glide, whether that's nerve or ligamentous or fascia or muscle. and then improve neuromuscular control. The great thing, of course, is that those three things are very closely linked. So whatever you throw at a patient, whatever your therapeutic intervention is, generally it'll fall into one of these three categories. Because, of course, we all hear, well, should we be touching people? You know, because exercise is also very relevant. What does manual therapy do? And to me, manual therapy is a window to immediate functional change. Immediate change to pain, immediate change to functional capacity, and again, patient compliance. Because if we can get a patient and show them immediately, look, I've just done something to your spine. Can you see how now you can bend down and touch your toes? Can you see how much more movement you've got out of your shoulder? Can you see how much stronger that quad now is? If you can do that, you can get a window to, well, no, I thought it was my degenerative disc that was causing it, but it clearly can't because you've just changed it. So patients need a story. Patients do need a story of what you're going to do, why they're in trouble, and how you're going to get them better. And this is one of the stories that I use a lot. I do this a lot to my patients because I tell them that we have an adaptive range or a capacity to deal with what life throws at us. And that capacity is a function of function. So if all your joints are free and mobile, your muscles are relaxed and strong, and your nervous system is firing on all cylinders, your adaptive range is out here. When you start getting joint stiffness and muscle tightness and poor performing nervous system, your capacity is here. You may not know this. You may feel fine until next time you go in the garden and you break down, or until next time you go and bend down to pick out the suitcase at the back of your car and you break down again. You don't break down because of your short leg or your scoliosis or your degenerative disc disease. You break down because your capacity to deal with that movement was reduced. And of course, as a chiropractor, we know that I'm so above treating pain. What I treat is function. And once you tell the patient, what I'm going to do is this. We're going to increase your capacity to deal with life. So I need to know how much life you need to deal with. And if the patient goes, well, I just want to be able to walk my grandkids to school, cool. If the patient goes, I'd love to do an Ironman, also cool, but you're going to need a little bit more functional capacity for us to do that, so that's going to take a bit more work, both from you and from myself. I'm a big fan of, some of you saw yesterday, I'm a big fan of pre- and post-testing. I grew up as a chiropractor never daring asking a patient how they felt after treatment, because I was afraid that they were going to say, that doesn't feel any different. Every time a patient leaves my office, I want at least one of three things to happen. Improvement in range of movement, improvement in pain, and improvement in strength. Hopefully all three. It doesn't always happen, but that's my goal. Because once you start testing and retesting after your interventions, you will be amazed of the changes that you see in your patients, and so will the patients too. And of course, we need a plan. So this is generally the generic plan. My report of findings is incredibly generic, whether someone comes to me with headache or knee pain or low back pain or screaming arm pain. Phase 1, we need to return to function. This is where I do most of my work. And again, there's a fair width of how quickly I'm going to treat that patient. It's going to be mainly passive treatment. It's going to be what I do to you. And the reason why I'm not going to give you a shed load of exercise for day 1 is because you have no functional capacity to deal with it. You can't walk around the shops. How on earth do you think your body can cope with exercise yet? We want to keep you active and keep you mobile and keep pushing it a little bit, but I'm not going to give you a sheet of 12 exercise because you haven't got enough functional capacity to deal with it. At the end of phase 1, we're going to get some better joint movement. We're going to have better strength, and we're going to have less pain. So your functional capacity starts here. Now let's start hitting you up with some exercise. And then we need to shift much after treatment, so I'll be doing less and less. We'll be weaning you off what I do and putting more emphasis on what you're going to be doing. And then phase 3 is we need to maintain that function. And again, it's all patient-led. You tell me what you need to do. And that, to me, is the key. One of the best quotes from our colleague Greg Lehman, we've been overcomplicating rehab for a long time. Of course, we all know about those studies that suggest that, when you extend your hip, if you dare contract your hamstring before your contralateral paraspinals and your glute, you're going to be in a whole heap of trouble and you deserve everything you get. I quite like this quote. To me, this is pretty much what rehab is all about. So phase 1 is where basically we calm things down. Phase 2, we build it back up again. So function and adaptive range, to me, it's a real window that patients understand. So often when you give them this and go, this, well, then I feel fine in between. I go and then I break down and then I rest for a bit and I feel fine. You feel fine, but you're not fine because your functional capacity was still reduced. It's just waiting for the next time you break through that barrier and then something breaks down again. In order to prevent that happening, we actually need to get you working better. And again, it's what our patients want. And to me, the lovely thing about this is that it encompasses pretty much everything we do, regardless of how anyone here practices chiropractic, whether they do SOT or AK or stick needles in people's or tape or whatever way you practice in clinic, this works. You can tell patients, I'm going to get you functioning better, and don't bother them about whether they're a category 2 or category 3 or they've got a L4, 5, PLR. They don't care. They just want to work better. And of course, it also encompasses a lot of what we know about the contextual effects, about how we deliver hope to our patients. So rather than the evidence-based report of finding that I did in the beginning, maybe an evidence-based report of findings should sound a little bit more like this. So Mrs. Smith, you've had your pain for a long time. And I understand how frustrating that is. I understand how frustrating it is to not be able to do the things you used to do. I understand how frustrating it is that you're now thinking, this has been getting worse and worse. What on earth am I going to be like in another 10 years' time? And I'm so grateful for you actually that you've taken the step to come into my clinic, because we're going to change that path. Can you see how that's the care? It's not, right, can you see all my diplomas on the wall? This is how clever I am. They want to know that you care, that you understand how deeply frustrating it is, and that you credit them for taking that first step of actually getting back into function and getting back into life again. So we're going to change this. I need to know what you'd love to be able to do. I need to know how we can get you back into functioning the best that you can. And Mrs. Smith, basically, we all know about ADLs, activities of daily living. I use RADLs, which is restricted activity of daily living. I want to know not just where that pain is, but what can't you do? Because that, to me, is my biggest yardstick. And she couldn't walk the dog, and she couldn't do gardening, and she couldn't golf anymore. So, of course, that's the first thing. Great. That's our target. Those are our aims that we need to get you back into doing. And she said, oh, I used to run when I was younger, but with my degenerative discs, I'll never walk. I'll never run again. We can get you running. And really? Yeah, we can get you running. I see no reason, after my examination today, having looked at your x-rays and your scans, I see no reason why we can't get you running again. There are people with much worse looking spines out there who are running. So let's make that our target. If that's what you want to do, let's make that our target. It may be 6 months. We're going to gradually get you back up to that. So initially, I'm going to be treating you fairly frequently. I'm going to do some adjustments to your spine. I may use some tape and may use some needles. I may use my little scrapey instrument. But all that's geared towards making you function better. Once we start getting you functioning better, and you will see changes. Within 5 to 6 treatments, you will be significantly better. I promise my patients this. Because to be honest, if within 5 or 6 treatments we're not seeing significant changes, I'm barking up the wrong tree. So this is the first promise of phase 1. Once that happens, we know we're starting to get a little bit of that adaptive range back. Now let's start turning up the volume a little bit. Now let's start actually getting you back into doing what you're doing. And it'll be gradually and slow. We've all heard of the couch to 5K principles, getting someone who's never run in their life to actually run 5K. This is the principle of rehab. This is the building stuff up. So that's basically where we need to be. And then we're going to get you walking. Once we can walk, we can get you walk with a little bit of a jog. Then we're going to take your dog out. Then we're going to start gradually doing a bit of gardening for half an hour and then start increasing that. So that's the plan. And can you see how that sort of report of findings basically fulfills those needs? It gives them, they know you care. They have hope for how much better they could do. And they have a really distinct plan of how that's going to work. And can you see, as Dave talks about with the contextual effects, can you see how that's now just wound that contextual effect up to 11? So to me, that should be our evidence-based report of findings. Thank you very much.